Hi, everybody. I think we are up and running here. I apologize for the delay. Had some technical issues. I think they persist, but we're just going to forge on. Um, as I understand it, Mayor Clark is present verbally, but not visually. So hopefully that can resolve itself. But Charlie, are you there? And can we just get you to say a few words so we know we can hear you?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. And
Okay.
so can the viewers at home.
I
So
I have a Plan B camera that I'm just working on to get it working. So
great.
my apologies too. I don't know what happened here.
Okay. So okay, I'm seeing some indications in the chat that maybe people are not able to hear us. Are people able to hear us? I think maybe the audio is still not working, Charlie. Oh, people can hear us. Okay, great. Well, that's hey, baby steps. All right. Thank you so much to our faithful technical assistants in the chat section. Very helpful. It takes a village to run a live stream. Okay, so for those who are just joining, we were having some difficulty with Mayor Clark's camera. So what we're going to do is soldier on, and he's going to see if he can figure out another way to join the call. So I apologize for starting late. This is one of the many perks of the circumstances we're in right now. We'll add a little bit of time at the end of the call just so that we make sure we have the full allotment to get through as many questions as possible today. And so this is how we would have started if everything had gone totally according to plan. I'm just going to make a few introductory remarks. My name is Marin Lowen. I'm the City Councilor for Ward 7, and this is the annual and now annual virtual Ward 7 Town Hall meeting with Mayor Charlie Clark. So I'm really appreciative of everybody being here this evening. I want to acknowledge that even though we're gathering virtually, we're doing that on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of many nations and the traditional homeland of the Métis. And I also just want to take a moment to acknowledge that there's been a lot of really difficult news in the last couple of weeks. Of course, the confirmation of a mass burial in Kamloops, which is a reminder of the devastating toll of colonialism and the residential school system in Canada, which obviously is relevant here in Saskatoon. And also the tragic terrorist attack that occurred in London, Ontario this week, resulting in the deaths of 4 members of the same family. And I know there have been a number of community events and vigils related to both of these tragic situations this week. In fact, I think perhaps Mayor Clark was just on his way from one of those events. And I know a lot of people in many of our communities are hurting right now. And I want to speak specifically just about what this means for our community, I think. The attack in London is a reminder that white supremacy and the violence that it perpetuates is a real threat in Canada, and that we can and need to push back against that threat by shrinking the spaces, the public spaces where those kinds of white supremacist attitudes can exist and grow. And at the city level, we're working to combat this and expose and rectify the systemic barriers that exist and the discrimination that exists within our organization so that we can serve the community more equitably. And I think as individuals right now, we can also create a safer community by speaking out when we see these small instances, no matter how small they may be, and watching out for one another. And I think this is really essential work right now as we grieve with those communities and attempt to make ours stronger. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Clark just for some opening remarks. And then what we're going to do is go over a few housekeeping things and get right into questions. So Mayor Clark, do you want to take it away? Apparently he does not want to take it away. Let's try this again.
Here we go.
Okay.
I was backstage.
Oh, sorry.
So I still haven't figured out why the camera won't fire up, but I do want to start by thanking you for organizing this event, for bringing us together, even though it's virtual, it's still really important that we hear from people where they're at. And I actually feel that as a mayor more and more, that even in these pandemic times, you can feel more disconnected in a lot of ways from the everyday lives of community, because we don't have the same way to gather at community events and community association events, but we're going through a lot together. And so I certainly appreciate the chance to do this. And in follow up to what you were just talking about, the last 10 days have been very intense, from the discovery of the 215 children in a mass unmarked grave in Kamloops, which has churned up so many strong feelings and memories and emotions from many, many people in our community, Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike, and been a reminder that there's still so much pain and heartache and impact from the residential schools and the ongoing impacts of colonialism in our community. And it's really an important time to listen to one another, support one another, and build a better way forward. And I did just come from a rally or a vigil actually at Civic Square, literally just a few minutes before this meeting started, because of the way that the 20-year-old man in a truck driving into a family out on a peaceful evening walk in London, Ontario, a Muslim family, and an attack that was targeted because they were Muslim. And there was a gentleman who spoke at this vigil, who I know, a man named Syed Daniel Mustafa, who's a leader in the community, a very gentle man, and he has a young daughter. And he shared that since that attack, since that man drove into that family, his daughter, he has a tradition himself to go walking every night with his daughter. And his daughter's been asking him to go walking. And he said that he's been making excuses because he doesn't feel comfortable and safe to do that. And that's here in Saskatoon. That's right here in our own community. The vulnerability that an attack like that in London leaves people here in our city feeling is very real. And we all have neighbors or coworkers, or our kids go to school with children and families within the Muslim community, within the Indigenous community. And all of that pain that people are experiencing, and the vulnerability, I think it's really, really both an important time to support one another and realize that those real experiences that people are facing, and to commit to building a city and a country where these kinds of attacks don't happen, where children are felt and treated with value and care and respect, and have a chance to be part of loving families and loving communities and loving school systems. This is what we have to work towards. So that has been very much front of mind. On top of, as we come out of the pandemic. So the last thing I will say is that, I've been incredibly grateful for our community, for how everybody's been working together to get through this pandemic. And it's taken a huge amount of effort by many people, including community associations and frontline workers and everybody involved. And it's so important right now that as we head towards the summer, that as many people get vaccinated as possible, get vaccinated with both vaccines. And right now, especially the ages from 12 up to 39 is the population of people that have not been getting vaccinated as quickly. And the longer it takes and the more people decide not to get vaccinated, the longer it will take for us to feel fully protected and safe as a community, as well as to be able to get together and regather and feel comfortable doing that. So it's a really important time that we all work together and make sure that people get vaccinated. So that's all I want to say to start. There's so many things that we can talk about, and I think we'll have a chance to do that as the questions come in. So thank you very much, Councillor Loewen, for all your leadership through this time as well.
Well, thanks very much, Mayor Clark. And I think what we're going to do now is just set this blank image free and allow the mayor to take a moment if he wants to try to troubleshoot that video issue while I go over a few housekeeping things for this evening. So what we're going to do is take questions both from the online form that has been posted and shared for quite some time now, and also questions that are submitted live. So if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you can just leave your question in the comments section and we will see it. You can also submit your question using the same online form that's posted on my town hall page on my website. And what we're going to do is prioritize questions from Ward 7 residents. So we have a number of questions from people outside the ward, and we thank you for your enthusiasm, but we're going to try to prioritize Ward 7 residents tonight. And because we have a number of people who have submitted more than one question, we're going to give every resident one question before we go around for a second round. Because we started about 10 minutes late, we'll take questions until 8:30, and then there's just going to be a few minutes of announcements at the end. We have a few pieces of information from the community associations of Ward 7 that I want to share with you. As a group of civically minded people who are gathered on this call, we just want to make sure you know what's happening in your community, ways to get involved further, and so forth. So I think with that, we're going to head into the question zone. I will, I'll add the mayor back in here. Looks like he's still sort of hiding in the shadows, but he is in fact here. So the first question we have is from Karen in South Newtown Park, and her question is, my question concerns infill homes and builds in new neighborhoods. I understand that owners of new builds in new neighborhoods can qualify for a $2,000 for landscaping and $6,000 for a driveway, while owners of new infill homes cannot access that rebate. New infill homes often have higher taxes than the house or houses they replace, so it seems the city could extend the rebate to infill development. Not to do so does not seem fair. So this is a great question. The reason that the rebates are structured the way they are is because the rebates are offered by the developers themselves at this stage. Saskatoon Land has its own rebate, and I know some other developers have them. I can't speak definitively about, you know, how many of those are out there, but to do this on a citywide basis in areas that are not being developed by Saskatoon Land would, I think, require a bylaw change. Saskatoon Land typically doesn't do infill development. They just, as a developer, don't own a lot of lots inside Circle Drive. But it has come up before, and there are some cities that do use a bylaw approach here, so it's not out of the question. We're still sort of in the experimental phase, I think, of this approach and evaluating how well it works. But I think the notion, we obviously want to make infill development as smooth as possible, and so it's something we could take a look at. Your Worship, do you have anything you'd like to add to that one?
I think you've covered it. I mean, there's definitely a different qualification sort of between a new home and a new development and existing infill homes because it's really a Saskatoon Land, which is a business operation who is creating those incentives, and so is Dream and others in order to work to make sure that long stretches of housing that are not landscaped and leading to that challenge within a neighborhood are getting landscaped, but that's a business transaction. That's a relationship of the sale of the home and some of those things, and it creates a whole different situation to try and address it within infill. As you said, you know, maybe there's some examples that we could draw on, but it is quite a different nature of housing. Yeah,
that's a relatively new policy approach for the city, but I think it's a good suggestion for us to take a look at broadening the options there for all new builds. So the next question we have comes to us from Ken in Stonebridge, and Ken's question is, these rubber blocking on Vic Road and Pringle Crescent, are they going to get poured concrete soon? Actually, that specific location may not. There have been some complaints about the way that particular installation has been functioning because I think of its proximity to a crosswalk. And so I think there's some further assessment happening on that specific section. Generally speaking, and I think residents often ask about this, the black rubber curbing that is all around the city is temporary and evaluated before it is made permanent to make sure that it's it's meeting the mark. And this is a function of the neighborhood traffic review program. And so some of those just won't be made permanent because they're not having the desired result, and other traffic calming measures would be investigated in their place. And that is one specific location where it may not be made permanent, just because there have been some concerns about, accidents, visibility, and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that the mayor doesn't have much to contribute to that one, and we'll move on to the next question. And this comes to us from Rick in Stonebridge. And Rick asks, can a safe bike/walking lane be added to Melville Street to safely and more easily access Lauren Avenue/river trails? And yeah, the answer is yes. This is a location that is part of the active transportation plan. So that's good news. I know that there's some more connections in and out of Stonebridge are needed for cyclists and for pedestrians. But unfortunately, this is not within the 5-year construction plan for active transportation projects. I would say that there is some possibility of accelerating some of these projects based on the fact that the federal government has just announced a dedicated infrastructure fund for active transportation, and I'm hopeful that that will allow us to accelerate some pedestrian and cycling capital projects that are on our existing to-do list. So it could potentially get into that 5-year cycle. Right now, it doesn't fit into that cycle. So thank you for that, Rick. Okay, I think the mayor is attempting to rejoin here. Yay, I see him. So just bear with us, viewers. I'm gonna add him to the stream here. There we go. Okay. Welcome back.
Hey.
Okay, so I'm just going to mute the mayor. It's not something I often get to do, so I'm just going to use that mute button liberally here while we get started on the next question. So the next question is, has any consideration been given to coordinating the infrastructure upgrades for streets, roads, curbs, sidewalks, and park renewals with active transportation? There are so many little things that are missed when these projects happen. And this question is coming to us from Charles in the Adelaide Churchill area. And I think the answer is yes. And we're definitely trying to get more coordinated interdepartmentally for these kinds of projects. I know Parks in particular is working more closely with transportation to try to find overlap and efficiencies when we do these kinds of projects. But I think there are some mitigating circumstances. There are lots of funding streams here at play. And sometimes there are recent upgrades to new sidewalks, roads, water and sewer infrastructure, and then active transportation team, the active transportation funding stream would go back to a location that might have been, addressed 5 years previous. And so it looks as though there is a lack of coordination there. And I suppose there has been, but there's sometimes an urgency to some of those water, sewer, road, sidewalk projects. That means that they don't totally overlap. I think the intent is there to definitely improve in this area because it's very frustrating for residents and it's very frustrating for council when those opportunities are missed. But I think I'd be interested in maybe following up with this resident by email just to get a sense of if there are any specific things they're observing. Your worship, do you want to chime in here on this one?
Well, certainly there are a couple of things that I would say, and I'm really sorry for my technical difficulties there. I had to fire up a whole different computer, and then I'm glad it's working now. So one example where I think we've done well to do that was the rebuilding of Victoria Avenue. And so, when that area had decrepit sidewalks, the road was in bad shape. But when the decision was made to rebuild the whole road in the lead up to the traffic bridge, we also then built in the bike paths along there to make a really good, our best complete street in the city, basically, when it comes to active transportation. Now, I think being more proactive in identifying the bikeways that have been identified by the city, so that you lay out where the bikeways can be and should be based on assessing the situation, is a way then of making sure that we can then align the improvements of those bikeways that improve. A lot of it is sidewalk improvements, curb cuts, things that are going to make those roads better for cycling, pedestrians, and traffic safety, that we do that in a more coordinated way. And for too long, really, we were not, every time we went in and fixed sidewalks, putting in the curb cuts. And council has directed administration to make sure that anytime we're going and doing infrastructure, we put those curb cuts in so that people with strollers or mobility issues, wheelchairs, can get around safely within the neighborhood. There's obviously more that we can do. It does mean planning ahead and then making sure that we coordinate those infrastructure improvements. So that has been a priority for council, and we're working towards that coordinated effort.
Great. Yeah, don't think I have too much more to add there. It's definitely an area where we can do better, and it's something that we're trying to make these sorts of projects as coordinated as possible. So the next question we have is from Hilda in the Churchill area, and she asks, would it be possible to apply a dust retardant to the back lane on the east side of Clarence Avenue between Wilson Crescent and Ruth Street? There has been so much traffic, especially when Clarence is closed for maintenance. So this is something that we have kind of done a bit of piloting on, but we don't have a dedicated dust control program for back lanes. There is some dust palliation options available, but the challenge is that they tend to have a fairly short-term benefit. I know that this is kind of an exceptional summer because of the amount of construction that's planned on Clarence, and so I think we might be able to apply some dust control there where we otherwise wouldn't. The challenge with the dust palliation options that we have available to us is that they kind of wash away when it rains. They don't last a particularly long time, and so the benefit for the money is not great. But I actually have heard this from a number of residents, so I think it's worth following up to see if we can do it on a temporary basis this summer. So that's a good question. It's one I've had a few phone calls about too. So Charlie, anything you want to add to that one?
Just that, we've been doing more targeted dust control, in particular, on the road access to the Sutherland Beach Dog Park, because of some of these same issues arising, not on the whole street, but on an area that it's creating issues for the neighborhood. And there are some very busy lanes, and we've been trying different targeted areas. It's hard to apply it right across the city, but identifying those lanes where there's a lot of traffic and coming up with the strategy. It does, cost additional resources to provide, that kind of service on some lanes than others. And so that's part of the challenge, is making sure that we're applying those in a systematic way. But council has been pushing administration to come up with more creative technologies and materials to apply. And so I think it's been quite successful where it's been tried with Sutherland Beach. And so I support what Councillor Lowen's saying, to be applying it in more places now that we've tried that out.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll follow up with that one. And I just want to say, if you are submitting a question, I should have mentioned this earlier and I apologize, but if you're submitting a question tonight and you'd like me to follow up with you, because we're probably not going to get through all of them, the best way to do that is to use the online form on my website, because that way I can send you an email afterwards. So feel free to use that if you're anxious to get a specific answer after the event this evening. So the next question we have is from Dorothy in Avalon, and Dorothy asks, please provide a schedule for road repairs in Avalon, specifically McConnell, 5th Street, Broadway Avenue, just to name a few. So McConnell is actually on the schedule for 2021. There's quite a bit of activity planned for road work in Avalon in the next 2 construction cycles. In 2021, Mendel Terrace, Crescent, Green, and Court will be resurfaced or microsurfaced. McConnell Avenue will be resurfaced. Ruth Street between Lorne and Broadway will be resurfaced, as well as some water and sewer connection work will happen on that street. Clarence between Ruth and Glasgow, and some of that work is underway right now. If you drive down Clarence daily, you'll see that that's underway. And then the following summer, so this would be, well, construction season, and 2022, Ruth will be finished from Broadway to Clarence. So in the next 2 years, Ruth will be done all the way from Lorne to Clarence. Albert Avenue, Hanover Avenue, Lansdowne, York, Butte, Clare Crescent, Yorath, Melrose, and Turner will all be resurfaced. And I think that the best way to get some information about this, there's an interactive map on the city's website, and that allows you to zoom in, almost to the address to find out what kind of treatment is going to be applied. Is it sidewalks? Is it road work? Is it both? Is water and sewer work happening underneath the roadway? Increasingly, as the mayor mentioned, we are trying to parcel these things together and make this as efficient as possible, both because it's a better bang for our public dollar, but also because it reduces the inconvenience to residents. So that's sort of the Avalon schedule. It's going to be a very busy 2 summers in Avalon, and so that's going to be disruptive in a lot of ways, but I know we have a lot of catching up to do in that area, and so I'm very pleased that there's quite a bit of work planned. So Charlie, anything to add to that one?
If it's even possible, we have the map that people can look. This is part of what we're trying to do, is make information much more accessible to residents. And we get those questions a lot about, when is my road going to be repaired? And now you can go online and look interactively, as you said. And I'm not sure if the moderator can share a link somehow to residents, but there is some great information there, so you can see that. And we have continued to expand our roadway repair budget and our sidewalk repair budget, as well as our underground servicing and water mains, and making record investments from any councils before on making sure that we're looking after and fixing up the roads and sidewalks in people's neighborhoods.
I just tried to share it. I think I shared it only to people watching on YouTube, sorry. But we'll figure out if we can get that posted in a more convenient location for people to see, because that is it's a really helpful tool if you're curious about your specific neck of the woods. Okay, the next question is kind of on a similar theme. The quality of our roads and sidewalks have really depreciated. Wilson Crescent in particular is in unacceptable shape. I noticed an older gentleman the other day who got stuck with his walker in the middle of a pothole-ridden crosswalk. It got me really angry when I read later that day that the city is spending $6 million on a 2-kilometer bike lane. How can the administration justify spending that kind of money on unnecessary road work like this while our roads are in such bad shape? And that comes to us from John in Newtown Park. So that's another really good question about roads. And I think I would just say that there is a balancing that happens, and it's not necessarily an either or question. In terms of getting infrastructure work done, it doesn't have to be one or the other. And in fact, the amount of investment that's taking place for roads is really significant. So in 2021 alone, the city will be spending $63.5 million for roads, sidewalks, and bridge maintenance, and completing about 165 kilometers of road work and 77 kilometers of sidewalk repair, and including Wilson Crescent this summer, I would add. So I know it can be frustrating to people who sort of see problems in one area and work taking place in another. But balancing the needs of different users, different road users, whether they be walking, cycling, driving, taking the bus, is important. And to neglect one user group really doesn't do anything but create longer wait times and more substantive capital projects further down the line. And we've seen that one of the greatest focuses in my time on council has been catching up to a historic underfunding of roads and sidewalks. And it's taken us quite a bit of time, and it's taken us a dedicated levy on your property taxes to make a dent in that backlog. And so, that is something I'm quite proud of, is the progress that we have made. But I would say that we don't want to make that progress at the expense of neglecting any particular user group. And accessibility of getting around the city is a really important thing. So I don't think we have to do one or the other. I think we can make progress on all of them, and I actually think we are doing that, but would readily acknowledge that we have lots more to do. Your worship?
Well, yeah, I was looking up on the map and I see Wilson Crescent. There's from to the west of Clarence or east of Clarence is going to be treated this year, as noted. And I also share the concern about the cost of the bike lane on Victoria Avenue. Council has identified that extending the bike lane that's there and the active transportation corridor that brings you from the traffic bridge. It's one of the best links into the downtown from all of those neighborhoods on the east side. Is a good route and can connect all the way to Stonebridge. And council has directed the administration to find ways to reduce the cost while still maintaining that connectivity. And so that's where that discussion is at. It is a significant price tag, and it will again be looked at as a coordinated effort in terms of other improvements in infrastructure of the area, and also leveraging. We are seeing some significant dollars specifically around transit and active transportation from other levels, from the federal level of government in particular. And so we're wanting to set up areas that we can do investment that doesn't take away from road investment or sidewalk investment, but that does allow us to continue to provide safe transportation for all users. But I don't disagree that price tag was significant. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a sticker shock issue on that one for sure. And I think, as the mayor mentioned, we have directed the administration to explore further cost reduction approaches to that specific stretch of bike infrastructure. And so that level of detailed work is yet to be complete, but I think we're all hopeful that we can see a reduction there, and certainly intend to fund that with mechanisms other than property tax. Okay, so we have two questions about bathrooms here, and I'm going to try to sort of give the highlights of each. It's kind of two different angles on the same issue. One is from Zoe, who asks, what is being done about the lack of bathroom access in Diefenbaker Park? Current washrooms only open in May, but park use has increased substantially. And the second question is from Janelle in Newtown Park. With more outdoor recreation being encouraged, is there any possibility of expanding the number of city parks with washroom access? Getting out in our parks would be a lot easier if washrooms are available. These are great questions. We have spent a bit of time talking about washrooms in the last month at council. We actually just debated a report and created a recommendation to access some funding from other orders of government to do some work on a strategy here. We know, and COVID has really highlighted this, that we have an issue with not necessarily locations, but access. So washrooms being closed for evenings and weekends for certain seasons of the year. And certainly I received a lot more comments this year from people saying, we're out more, we're skiing, we're walking, but we need to have washroom access. So there are kind of two pieces of this. One is that council is going to look at what we can do to improve access with our existing fleet. I don't know if that's the correct collective noun for washrooms, but the second piece is to figure out, okay, where do we not have public washrooms where we need to have them? And so I think we can improve accessibility, as Zoe points out, just through winterization of some existing buildings. But there is, as Janelle points out, another question here around actually not having enough of them throughout the city. And this is a concern for all residents, I think, for vulnerable people who are vulnerable to homelessness, to people who have all kinds of different needs. This just makes sense as a way to make outdoor activity and city life more functional. So it's on the radar. Your Worship, do you have anything to add?
Well, last night, just while the kids were getting ready for bed, we were talking about what the different names are for collectives of elephants, herd of elephants, and but I never thought of a fleet of washrooms. That's pretty unique. But I think the point of making sure, I think it's just been amazing to see the way that we have these new recreational sites. You know, I went skiing a lot at Gordie Howe, what's the golf course down in the southwest at the Holiday Park Golf Course. I've been playing disc golf, actually. These are sort of very good COVID activities. We've seen Optimist Hill, you know, lit up, and so that's the value of making sure that as we find more and more great ways to get people out to use our great, amazing public spaces, not just in the summer, but in the winter, making sure that there's good amenities, washroom amenities, and all of those things is going to only help that. And so we've done well by creating, there's going to be a whole new facility in the winter at Holiday Park by those ski trails that'll be associated with, attached to the oval, and there'll be washrooms there. That'll be awesome for people to use. And at Optimist Hill, they have some washroom facilities, but having more there makes sense. And as Councillor Loewen said, we gotta also make sure that they're safe and secure, and also that there's those services being provided for everyone. So I appreciate the question and the goal of making it so that people can really get out and enjoy these facilities all year round.
Yes, I'm seeing in the chat that actually inventory is the word I was looking for. Fleet makes it sound like a mobile situation, which it really isn't. So the next question comes to us from James, and he asked, what percentage of recyclable materials are currently going into the dump? And I'm assuming, James, that you're curious about from the city's recycling program versus, you know, the waste stream. And I regrettably do not have this information in my brain. I will say that we have established a contamination rate for the program that's fairly ambitious, and that, to the best of my knowledge, our provider for single family homes have been able to meet. But that may not be the question that you're asking. I think this is probably a question prompted by the recent, in the last number of years, public conversation about how much of what we collect in public recycling programs is actually recycled versus landfilled at some step in the chain. As I said, I just don't have that information in my brain right now. I'd be happy to follow up because I think that information does exist. But one of the major changes to the civic recycling program has been, of course, that some markets for certain recyclable products, notably some types of plastics, have really fallen apart, particularly because of some changes made in the Chinese market. And so we're going to have to be nimble. I think there are still very strong markets, from what I understand, for certain types of recyclable plastics. Not all numbered plastics are created equal in terms of their ability to be repurposed. Paper and cardboard still has a relatively strong market, and these things sometimes ebb and flow. So I think, when we think about what will recycling look like in the future for cities, for communities, I think it likely will shift over time, and there will be some products that will not have long-term recycling markets. And that's where I think we really need to have really good coordination between orders of government to make sure that packaging industries are held accountable, because this stuff, we're kind of where the buck stops, right? Like when there are issues with recycling and waste, it ends up being in municipal landfills, and we want to keep that material to a minimum. So that's probably a less direct answer than you were hoping for. I'd be happy, James, to follow up with you if you'd like to send me an email. Your Worship, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I'll try and be quick to say that one misconception is that as a result of some of these changes, because we don't have film plastic or plastic bags allowed in recycling, and now the cardboard cups, that somehow the amount that there's a significant drop in the amount of recyclable materials. The reality is that ever since we began the Blue Bin program, we are still able to recycle 94% of what it was originally being able to be recycled. And some of those market changes that you described are something that we're dealing with. But by far the mass majority of what we've ever been able to recycle since the Blue Bin program came in is now done. One of the biggest recyclable material that's going to the landfill is organics material. That's, in any residential bin, whenever we've done waste audits, it's 58% of the weight and volume of what people are throwing away right now is stuff that can be composted. And that's why we're starting a green bin program that's going to be citywide and universal starting in 2023, so that we can take a lot of that material and save the landfill space and reuse it. I just went to the landfill or to the compost depot myself and filled up a bunch of compost that I could put in my flower beds, and it's great. And the other big thing that's going into the landfill is a lot of construction and demolition waste, wood, rocks, concrete materials, and so on. And we are making a significant investment in the landfill to create Recovery Park, which we just discussed 2 days ago at committee, to make sure that we can make it a lot easier for people to recycle those materials. So we have been behind as a city, frankly, for too long. And these are important, significant steps that we're taking to divert a lot more material out.
Yeah, and we have a green bin program now that just doesn't really tackle the issue in the same way that we saw a huge benefit in terms of the diversion of recyclable materials. When the city implemented a citywide recycling program, I anticipate and expect that we'll see a significant reduction in the amount of organics that goes to the landfill. And we really need to keep organics out of the landfill for a few reasons. It takes up space, but organic material breaking down in a landfill also creates pretty harmful emissions. And so it's a priority for sure. And that's only a couple of years away from implementation. We're continuing to make decisions about the structure of that program, and it's exciting to see that it's not too far away. So at that point, the green bin program that we have now, which is subscription based, will end, and it'll become a citywide program. And I know there's lots of anticipation about that. So I think we'll move on. The next question is, what is the basis of property tax evaluation made by the city to determine for tax purposes? And this is from Sheeb in Stonebridge. And this is a very timely and great question, because of course it is an assessment year. And so I know a lot of people who are in receipt of their assessment notice might be wondering how the city came up with this number. And generally speaking, the assessment value of your property is determined by a group of sales of like properties. So the assessment department would look at properties that are similar to yours. Let's say you live in a semi-detached home, then they would look at sales of semi-detached homes with similar characteristics and determine what sort of the average assessed value would be in that pool of properties. And so this can be a bit of a shock, because there can be, based on market data, some pretty significant fluctuations in assessed value, and that affects your property tax rate. So that's how the city makes that determination. I think the mayor has a link here. We're going to share that in the chat, and hopefully if people have further questions about that process, that can be you can find a little bit more information there. I would also note, if you have questions about your assessment, the assessment department is available to answer those questions, and it is possible to appeal your assessment if you feel that it's out of whack, it doesn't represent your property accurately. That is a fairly accessible process. And I would also note that the city has been lobbying to make the assessment process, which is currently a 4-year cycle, an annual process at the provincial level, because I think that would reduce the fluctuations and the shock that people experience with those 4-year swings. So it's a very complex area. I know I'm probably not doing it justice. Your Worship, do you have anything you'd like to add? I'm just going to share this link in the chat, and hopefully people can poke around if they have any technical questions about their own properties.
just to say that one of the problems of the way we have assessment, there's two big problems. One is that the assessment year that is used is 2 years ago. And so that often is one of the things that create, especially now that we're in a pandemic and everything, and people look at their assessed value of their property, and it's been assessed based on January 2019. And so there's often a feeling of a disconnect. And the other is that we have a long assessment cycle every 4 years, which creates significant fluctuations as Maren said. These rules are set by the province. They're the same for every city and every municipality in the province. And so we have been advocating to try and get agreement to shorten that assessment cycle, and more recently, even in discussions to try and have it so that the assessment year is closer to the date that people get their bills. But all of the formulas and so on are as discussed, are set provincially. So appreciate the question by Mr. Potter. If you can look up, there's some very good information on the city's website that lays it out. It's a confusing process for sure, but we have been really working to lay it out as clearly as possible for people.
Great. Okay, and that link has been posted, I think, successfully to both channels, so hopefully that's accessible and people will let us know in the chat if it's not working. The next question we have is from Dawn in Avalon, and Dawn's question is, what is the plan for residential snow removal? And this is timely because there was just a fairly in-depth conversation at the Transportation Committee last week and at GPC. Oh, all the committees are blending together, I must admit, but we've had a couple of conversations about this recently, including about, what's our plan for managing major snow events like the one we had last November. We do have an existing sort of extreme weather event reserve, but the amount that reserve has been funded to in the past just isn't substantial enough to be a reliable source for those types of events in the longer term. So we had a conversation about setting up, a funding source for those extreme weather events to make sure that we're in a position to respond adequately. But then a second conversation around a more predictable plan, including, funding to a level of snow removal that would allow for annual load out. So to talk technical snow terms, which I know is on everybody's mind in June, typically the city's approach is to clear the streets but not remove the snow and leave them in windrows, aka piles, at the side of the street, and then load those out, maybe on busier streets. And last year, just because of the amount of snow that was received and the difficulty that everyone was experiencing getting around the city, all of that snow was loaded out. It's a very expensive process. It's not one that we have budgeted to do as a matter of policy, but there is some interest, I think, in exploring that. And what would it take for us to fund that as a sort of as a level, a predetermined level of service? So in answer to your question, Dawn, I think the plan is still evolving. This is one of those things that's constantly being debated. We have not arrived at a perfect solution. I don't know if any winter city ever does. We need to make tweaks based on what we learn from season to season. But I think based on last year's experience, I'm hearing an interest from residents in doing more as a part of our regular level of service than we have in the past. So, Your Worship, did you want to respond to that?
I think you covered it well. This is going to be an active conversation in the next weeks as we identify the most strategic way to build up the capacity when needed to have snow removal, while not spending so much resources that we raise taxes and so on, even though it may not be something that is required each year, which we have found. So that's the balancing act, and we had a good discussion at Transportation Committee about finding some options forward.
I think probably the final word on that will happen around budget time when it comes time to actually allocate resources to a potential increase in the level of service for snow. So stay tuned. The next question comes to us from John in Adelaide Churchill. He says, very supportive of our new fire hall location. Is it mandatory to have sirens going in the late hours when there is zero traffic? And the answer is no. And I think, you know, based on my conversations with the fire department at that hall specifically, I think they try to be pretty sensitive about, you know, not using those lights and sirens unless it's absolutely necessary. But I'm going to assume, based on the question, that is happening, and so I can commit to following up with the fire department and seeing if that can be tweaked, because you know, one of the sort of conditions, if you will, of moving to that location was to try to minimize the disruption to residents. So it is a busy street, but certainly in the middle of the night when there's zero traffic, I would expect that's not necessary. So thanks for the question, John. I'd be quite happy to follow up on that. Anything from you, Charlie?
I hadn't heard of that concern, but it might be not a bad idea, Mr. Wetlaufe, for John to even go and talk to the folks there about it, and so they know, especially if you have specific times where this has been a concern or specific incidents, because that has been, the policy has been to minimize that disruption for sure.
Okay. Yep, agreed, and I can take that on as well. The next question is from a different John in exhibition. And I think this question must have come in maybe a week or two ago, but let's answer it anyway. How can council possibly justify developing Optimus Park when the city's own planning documents for the last 20 years anticipated an enhancement of Optimus Park and an expansion of parks in the city? So just as a bit of context, there had been some contemplation of Optimus Park as a site, potential site, for the new consolidated school on the west side of the city. And that has been taken off the table, I would say, by the school division. So Optimus Park is no longer being considered as a possible school site for that consolidated new school. I would say, though, I think this kind of hints at an issue, a larger issue, which is, you know, generally speaking, a lack of green space in core areas relative to new areas. The development standards of the day were just different. And now we find that in older parts of the city, there just isn't enough park space to meet the needs, the recreation needs of the community. So we are talking about how to, I would say, you know, make the most of the green space and opportunities to enhance and expand it. I anticipate there might be other circumstances in the future where we'll be looking at school relocations and consolidations, and certainly the consideration of Optimus Park in this instance, I think, was at the request of the school division, and only really because there were a lack of viable sites that are suitable for a school. So I think that question is sort of it's a bit dated in terms of when it must have come in, but hopefully I have understood it correctly. Anything to add, Charlie?
Nope, we're not developing Optimus Park.
That's the Coles one. Yes. Okay. So we have another question from Jan and Lawrence in the Queen Elizabeth area. Their question is around they say this is our perennial question of extremely noisy vehicles, especially pickup trucks and motorcycles. During the summer months, I know this is you know, yes, a perennial question. And so the city's tools to combat this are pretty much enforcement. And we, throughout the years, have tried to explore a few creative solutions. The difficulty with that we've, I think, encountered is just the lack of predictable and reliable methods to enforce sound infractions other than catching motorists in the act, which really has to happen from police patrols. And we have explored some other possibilities, none of which have really panned out over the years. So I think the primary method is enforcement, and the way to tackle this issue is through ticketing. But I would also say the way to best target that enforcement is to have intel from residents. So if this perennial concern applies to you, and your life and sitting on your deck in the summer, I would just encourage you, if you're noticing traffic patterns at a particular time, let me know. You can email me and I can pass that along to the traffic division, because that really helps to try to target enforcement efforts to the locations and times and dates when it's most offensive. So anything to add there, Charlie?
No, I guess just to reinforce that we know this has an impact on quality of life. I think with the pandemic, we've been feeling that even more when people have been home more and so on. And it's police have been really working with cities right across Canada to find the best tools to be able to regulate and enforce it, because it's been difficult to actually catch people in the act and hold people accountable when they. I think it's very, very frustrating when people modify vehicles, make them even louder, and then go around invading the peace and quiet in a city. It's not fair, and I'd like to see us be able to hold people account. And it's just been very difficult to come up with the right mechanisms to do that.
Yes, it's not just a Saskatoon issue. You know, lots of cities are trying to figure out creative ways to tackle this problem. So the next question comes to us from Jay in the exhibition area, and you know, I realized I've been taking the first crack at all of these. I'm going to allow the mayor to take the first crack at a few, so that you know, he has a chance to opine before I get in there. So the next question from Jay is: does the city have any plans to encourage the growth of walkable, bikeable, mixed-use neighborhoods and discourage sprawl, car-centric neighborhoods? Go ahead, Your Worship.
Yeah. So
I'll give you a really easy one.
So the city's growth plan has actually set the target to have 50% of all of future growth and be infill, and 50% be in greenfield new neighborhoods over the next 50 years. So we're not there by any means yet. Right now, we still have about over 80% of growth is in greenfield and 20% in infill, although we've seen a huge increase in the number of units of residential housing. Now we worked to make it easier and more of a level playing field for residential. For example, in the downtown, we have now the largest residential project in the history of Saskatchewan going up at 25th and 5th. There's a Beto project with over 400 units of residential development, and there's been several more because we know it's better, or that at least it's advantageous to put people in places, like the question says, that are walkable, bikeable, and easy for people to get everything they need, you know, from close to their homes. And the other exciting thing that's coming up is the university has some development plans that would reutilize some of the lands that are right in the center of the city, that already have roadway access, already have transit access, are close to many of the services that you know, the university and other things, and that you can easily connect through pedestrian and cycling infrastructure and all those things. And we just had the sector plan come to City Council last month, and we're making progress. So over the next 20 to 30 years, the city will look quite different, and I think will be more efficient in its growth, and will be able to make better use of all of that land while still preserving the character of existing neighborhoods, which is really, we know, is really essential. And so this is one of the big goals of our council that we've identified as we grow into the future, and we are making some pretty important progress on it. And now over to you, Councillor, if you want to add to that.
Sorry, I inadvertently reposted to the screen property tax notice there. The technical adventures persist today. So I don't have too much to add other than that we do have plans to encourage this, and the mayor has sort of talked about what those are. I think, you know, as someone who has both established neighborhoods and new neighborhood development in my ward, what really strikes me is how difficult it is to retrofit neighborhoods once they're built to implement or to enhance these features of being walkable and bikeable and having mixed use amenities accessible to people. And so it's really critical to get it right the first time, because it is not easy to go back and punch through bike lanes or you know, mixed use development once a neighborhood is built. So it's really important. It is part of the growth plan. And you know, it's a work in progress. Okay. Another question coming up here. This is from, I think, James in Queen Elizabeth. And the question is, what rash of accidents is prompting City Hall to look at lowering traffic speeds in the city? To my knowledge, we've not had a huge rash of accidents. Of the 4 pedestrian deaths that occurred last year, 1 seemed to be a train accident, while 2 others did not involve speed. Do you plan to install speed cameras on every corner of the city to enforce this? It seems to me you're going to be going after a lot of otherwise law-abiding citizens for no apparent reason. And why is this debate happening now rather than last year when an election was being held? So go ahead, Your Worship. You can, I know this is an issue that goes back even before my time on council. So you go ahead, and I'll have something to share when you're done.
Well, certainly, I think I want to start by saying this is not about going after law-abiding citizens by any means. You know, having done a whole series of different town halls and having attended many neighborhood traffic reviews in many different neighborhoods of the city, one of the things that we hear from almost most consistently on a regular basis is safety within neighborhoods and concerns that people have walking their kids to school, walking to a bus stop to get groceries and other things, and being concerned about cross-cutting traffic going through neighborhoods and creating an unsafe environment. And people want to know their kids can walk safely to school, and to do those things, and that residential streets are not treated as throughways. So there's a few different ways you can address that. One is by traffic calming measures, another is by police officers, and others by speed enforcement. And so it was council actually, you know, that identified to look at this again, because there's been many requests for us to evaluate whether it's speed limits in school zones, speed limits in playground areas, and speed limits on residential streets. So we have a sort of and we know it's divisive. I know every time it comes up, there's going to be people who think this is just about trying to slow people down. I really want to be very clear that this is not about slowing commuters down. This is not about slowing down arterial streets or the streets that are designed to move traffic more quickly. It's the local residential streets where we have where people sometimes use them to cut through neighborhoods where we have the concerns, and we're trying to respond to those concerns. But it seems to be, as the results showed, kind of a 50-50 opinion that the residents have, and so we are going to be having to deliberate over that. One thing that's risen to the top has been high school zones, and even now the federal guidelines by the Transportation Association of Canada are identifying that high school zones, speed zones, are not identified as a best practice. And so in doing this, we're not just looking at where do we slow people down, but does the overall sort of mix of speed controls that we have make sense? And I think those are going to be what we look at. Does it make sense to, you know, not have the speed zones in high schools, but perhaps have some of the controls more in areas where there's kids playing in playgrounds? Does it make sense to apply it in residential streets? We're going to have a series of recommendations from administration coming forward, and sometimes we have to make tough decisions and we have to have tough debates, you know, and we know we're not going to make everybody happy, but the goal is to try and create as much safety and quality of life in neighborhoods. And you're right, even though we haven't had a huge rash of accidents, every time somebody gets hit, it's much less harmful to that person if the car is going more slowly in residential areas. And this is becoming a debate and a discussion in cities right across the country because of similar issues. So there will be more discussion, and council will have to decide, you know, what is the right balance to strike. But we're not doing this just to make people angry. We're doing it to try and address safety in neighborhoods.
Thanks. And, you know, I think I don't have too much to add, which is something I always say, and then I talk for 7 minutes. So, but I'll try to be succinct here. I think the one of the critical things for me is that every time I receive a complaint about speed in a neighborhood. The option then is to send out evaluation of some kind, either from the transportation department or from the police service. And more often than not, the results come back and show that actually most motorists are going 50 kilometers an hour or thereabouts, right? Like sort of within the margin of error. And what residents are experiencing is that really on most residential local streets in this city, 50 kilometers an hour feels way too fast. It feels pretty appropriate on an arterial or a collector street, but on a residential local street, someone going 50 kilometers an hour past, you know, most of our homes would feel very alarming. And so that creates a lot of anxiety, and it also creates difficulty in the city's ability to respond. You know, if nobody is going above the speed limit, then enacting traffic calming measures is difficult to do. And that was one of the most consistent themes that we saw out of the neighborhood traffic review process. And by the way, we've now conducted one of those community-led processes in almost every neighborhood in the city, and traffic speed is it's a perennial issue in those conversations. And people feel like there isn't really a mechanism to address it. And so we do have an issue, I think, with understanding what this debate is really about, and the mayor alluded to that. And this really isn't about trying to, you know, make it impossible for people to get around the city. But at council, what was happening was we would get a request to have school years go all year round, and then from a separate community group, we'd have a request to have playground zones enacted, and from another neighborhood, perhaps a request for the whole neighborhood to have a lower speed limit. And so rather than having sort of a patchwork of approaches, my view and the view of the majority of councillors who referred this for a report, I want to say that was about 2 years ago now, was that it might make sense to review our overall approach to speed limits in the city and try to approach it in a more strategic fashion rather than looking at individual interventions that really make moving around the city much more confusing. And I know lots of residents find those high school speed zones quite frustrating, and so that's part of this review. So, you know, and I understand that the commenter may be feeling like this is coming out of nowhere and why weren't we talking about this during the election? You know, I think the reason it's in the news now is because there's been a recent report on the results of the engagement, which, as the mayor indicated, was about split 50-50 down the pipe, which, you know, makes our debates perhaps a little bit more complicated. But I think it's a debate worth having. Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg are all, you know, either have already decided to lower residential speed limits or are in the middle of debating it. So I think it's an important conversation. I think from my point of view, and I've kind of made my position on this known for a number of years, like protecting the most vulnerable road users, i.e. pedestrians, children, seniors, cyclists, is something we need to take very seriously, and the severity of collisions decreases with the rate of vehicular speed. So I think it's an important debate for the community to have, and I know it won't be easy because there are strong feelings about this, but that doesn't make it a less important conversation for us to have, and lots of anxiety exists in the community about this, so I think it's a good one for us to tackle. And it'll take some time. Okay, so next up is another traffic question, and I'm going to tackle this one because it's quite Ward 7 specific. Traffic flow around Stonebridge Common is a real problem. When cars are parked on both sides, especially during soccer games or events, two vehicles can barely pass through. Pedestrians, often kids, jaywalk, and it is only a matter of time until someone doesn't see someone dart out between vehicles. Please consider making parking legal on one side only or making it a one-way street all year round. And this is from Sherry in Stonebridge. And yes, talk about perennial issues. This is one. I think the challenge we have here, Sherry, is that I would liken this to a game of whack-a-mole. We could definitely remove parking from one side of Stonebridge Common, but because of the number of events hosted in that park, as you've mentioned, those vehicles would then move further into residential areas to park. And I wouldn't say the community has been super enthusiastic about that option. The one-way street option was contemplated at one point. The transportation department at the city didn't recommend that. I think partially because there are so many access points to the school. It's a busy space, and the possibility of creating motorist confusion there is quite high. So there just is no silver bullet. Again, this gets back to the comment about, you know, when you create a design issue in the early stages of the neighborhood, it's tough to fix it once it's built. So, you know, Sherry, I'd be happy to chat with you more about this. I'll just leave it there for now. There really isn't a single option or intervention that the community agreed on here. So it remains an unsolved problem, but happy to talk about possible solutions. Okay. Next, lots of traffic questions now. The next one is from a different Dorothy in Avalon. In what ways are you moving forward for traffic calming on Glasgow Street? Speed humps were installed 2 years ago to reduce speed. What initiatives are you encouraging and working on to reduce the 3,500 vehicles that cause a physical and mental health hazard to the residents on Glasgow Street? And again, I'll take a crack at this because this is pretty local. There are no active interventions planned for Glasgow Street beyond the speed humps. The speed humps were sort of the last of a series of piloted interventions on this street. The transportation department recommended those and they've been installed, but there is no further action planned. It's not what we would consider an open file at City Hall because that was the last direction given by council. So to initiate a new process there would require a motion from or recommendation from the transportation committee, and so there really isn't anything else planned there. But again, if there are concerns about speeding at particular times of day, days of the week, please feel free to follow up and we can talk about targeting some enforcement efforts in that area. Next question, also traffic related. Can we add speed bumps on streets where roundabouts are? And this comes from Maria in Stonebridge. I think the answer would be maybe, but I would say that I think usually the roundabouts are in Stonebridge in an intersection control capacity. And so it would probably depend on what recommendations have already been made for traffic calming in those areas in Stonebridge and whether or not they would meet that speed threshold. So Maria, I'm going to encourage you to follow up and we can talk about specific concerns and see if there's something that needs follow-up from the city's traffic review process in that area. Okay, next
Can I just say that I think this reinforces that there's a lot of opinions around speeding in neighborhoods, and this is what we have certainly found. And the council has actually worked quite hard to make speed bumps an option because there was a long time where administration didn't want that, and Glasgow and other streets were ones where we just said we think we really need to try this out and expand it. So that does enable us the ability to at least have that tool as well. So as the pilot projects have unfolded, I can't believe it's already 2 years since we put them in Glasgow. It feels like time is going by very fast from that point of view. But I think it is seeming to be an option that's providing some relief in some areas.
Yeah, it's nice to have that as an option for sure. And it's something that lots of residents ask for. The next question is from Claire in Newtana Park. And Claire asks, has responding to COVID-19 affected the city's ability to focus on and implement its climate change mitigation plans? It's a really good question. Your Worship, go ahead.
I would say it actually hasn't. If you look at the 2021 budget that was just passed, we were able to include quite a number of initiatives around moving forward on our opportunities and interventions around climate change. Everything from the installation of LED streetlights, we're making a major investment in that, which we using the federal ISIP funding, which is a tranche of funding that we're using. We're able to expand our landfill gas capture to be able to capture more of the very dangerous methane that goes into the air and turn it into power that we sell back into the SaskPower grid. We're also going to be building a large-scale solar plant over quite close to the landfill on some land that's right adjacent to Circle Drive called Parcel M that really doesn't have any other use. And we're hoping to be able to build up to 5 megawatts of solar there and to be able to drive the innovation and research around solar technology as the cost and the price and the technology the cost goes down and the technology gets more advanced. We've implemented the home energy loan program, which is innovation that we developed in conjunction with the Home Builders Association as a way of both helping to create jobs, to help build innovation and get builders more and more able to do to do the retrofits and the energy efficiencies that more and more customers are looking for, and to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, as well as piloting electric vehicles within the city and working to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place around electric vehicles in the city. We know that that's going to be a big shift. Everywhere I look now, I see more electric vehicles in our city, as well as piloting an electric transit bus. So, and then the other thing we're doing, and we just discussed this on Monday, is a high performance buildings, and making sure that we're taking steps to ensure that every civic building that's built has a better life cycle cost, is more efficient, uses less money required for its operations, and also reduces its greenhouse gas emissions. And so we're setting standards for that, and we've already seen significant benefits by having LEED Silver design, for example, with the police building that saved over $750,000 a year. So I would say that COVID hasn't slowed down our work to try and show leadership in this area. We know it's really important to do it. Every time I go to a school, the kids ask me, what are you doing to help make sure that we're doing our part with regards to the planet? But we're also seeing some significant cost savings as a result, and opportunities for partnership with industry in doing these as well. So, and actually Marion gave me this question, but this is an area that Councillor Lowen has been providing a lot of leadership on, and helping to move these projects along.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't think I have too much to add to that. Certainly, every organization has been, had its focus shifted and distracted in some areas, but I see a lot of progress being made on our overall strategy here, and don't think we've been sort of taken off course in a substantial way on most of those projects. So, which I think is great news. The next question we have is from Betty Lou in Adelaide Park, Churchill, and she asks, any chance spring street cleaning could be delayed in Ward 7 due to massive elm seed showers? Yeah, this is a question that I think every older neighborhood has. This is another example of a situation where there are just some trade-offs. A later sweep means, the dust and gravel are removed from the roadways at a later date. And there's also some operational issues just with doing different parts of the city at radically different times. But we do try to respond, I think, to these circumstances. One of the things that I hear is, some people want a later sweep to deal with the seeds and pollen in some areas. But other people would rather have the earlier sweep to get rid of gravel and dust. So it's just a tough one. But yeah, again, this is probably something we could revisit. I know as the longtime Ward 6 councillor, Charlie's probably received this question too. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, it's tough to schedule around Mother Nature with issues like this, for sure. I see the late dropping of those seeds, and there's always these variables that are tricky to plan for. So I don't think I have anything to add to what you said, Councillor.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So this one says, Stonebridge question, can the bus stop be moved at Galloway Road and Robert H. Freeland Park? The new extended crosswalk stops traffic from going around the bus. Yes, I have noticed that. That is certainly a possibility. Again, I can ask Transit whether or not that could be bumped down a little bit, and I'm not sure of the name of this submitter. So if you'd like to follow up with me by email, I'd be happy to get back to you on that one. I don't have an answer for you today, but I think it's a possibility. The next question is from Carla in Exhibition. Will there ever be a better acceleration lane to connect Lorne Avenue traffic eastbound to the freeway? Again, I'm not sure. I don't think I've been asked that question before, and I'm actually not sure if you mean Lorne at Adelaide or Lorne at the South Bridge. So maybe it would be helpful to follow up, if you don't mind, Carla, shooting me an email, and we can just get a little bit more specifics, and that might help me direct your question appropriately to the right city admin.
I think that would be connecting when you turn off south on Lorne and just before Melville.
Right.
But I've never actually heard like you about the idea of trying to the acceleration lane issue and the safety of merging onto Circle Drive has been an issue. So I don't have an answer either, but interesting question for sure.
Yeah, and like I said, Carla, if you want to just share an email, that I'd be happy to follow up and make sure I'm actually answering the question that you want answered. So I'm just going to say we have just a couple minutes left. I think this will probably be maybe our last or second last question, depending on how quickly we get through it. And then we're going to just do a few minutes of announcements from community associations, and then we'll wrap it up. So the next question is, any designs yet for the stormwater pond? Where in the park will it be located? And this is from someone in the Churchill area. So the answer is yes. There is a site that's been designated for the storm pond, and that'll be at Churchill Park. But the design plans are a work in progress right now, and so I think for residents who are interested in this, the city's Engage page has quite a bit of information about process, and there should be, if it hasn't already, there should be a flyer going into the mailboxes of Adelaide Park Churchill residents in the next week with some information about this process. So what'll happen is there will be some videos uploaded on the Engage page that explain the process. Then there will be a public virtual meeting for people to weigh in on some of the design options, and from there it'll be finalized. So this is an active file. I don't yet have a date for that public meeting. I think it's still being determined, but you should get a flyer soon. And so if you have specific questions about the design, you can check that Engage page or let me know and I'll make sure you get that information. I think this is our last question, and I think it can be quick. Famous last words. Given the population and demographic of Stonebridge, would the city consider changing zoning to allow for additional childcare centers? And this is from Kim in the Stonebridge area. Generally speaking, childcare centers are a discretionary use in a lot of residential zoning districts, and so that's the approach. I can't remember turning one down in Ward 7. So I think that the probability of additional childcare centers being allowed is very high. But to change it as a blanket zoning to allow them everywhere is probably quite unlikely, because that's something that is coordinated with the province and overseen as part of our discretionary use process. So definitely very good chance of more childcare centers being allowed in Stonebridge. Probably the same process would apply, that it would remain a discretionary use. So I think we're kind of getting to the end. I'm just gonna before we get into the announcements section, is there anything you'd like to add, Your Worship? I think we have one more question, intriguing question here. About something called foot golf. And as a novelty sport enthusiast yourself, Your Worship, you might want to take a crack at that one. Go ahead.
Well, no, actually, somebody said that they're wondering if we've looked into adding a foot golf course to one of the city golf courses. And I have never heard of foot golf, but we have seen a massive expansion of disc golf and all kinds of other sports, paddleboarding and spike ball and all these different things. So I'm going to look that up and see what that is a little bit more, and I appreciate the question. I didn't have a good answer for it, though. I was just interested in that coming up in the chat. We're trying to make the city as fun as we can, for sure, and to accommodate different ways that people get out there and get exercise and enjoy the city.
There's so many great questions here that we did not have time for. I see this is an intriguing comment in the chat, just chickens ? And we probably need another hour at least to tackle that one, but I'm happy to follow up with people who submitted questions by email. I think someone also asked whether or not this is viewable later, and it is. So if you had to leave and you missed a question you were interested in, you can watch it and fast forward and skip through until you find what you're looking for. It'll stay up, I think, in perpetuity. So I think our town hall from like 4 years ago is still posted. So I'm gonna just attempt to share my screen here, and we'll see how well that goes. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry everybody for making you sit through that. So here we go. Here's some information from community associations in Ward 7. If you're watching this call, I think you care about your city and your community associations are always looking for people like you. So here's a rapid fire look at what some of the CAs in Ward 7 are up to. Avalon Community Association has some contact information here. They're looking for some help. There are a number of vacant positions you could check out if you're interested, including vice president, secretary, special events coordinator, and member at large. And there are a couple of fun things happening this summer to help the ACA improve the rink. One is recycling for the rink event. Bring your recyclables to the Daily Scoop on June 19th from 3 to 8, and they will go to support rink building efforts, and you'll get a free ice cream cone, so what's not to love? And there's also an ongoing fundraiser at the Daily Scoop where if you buy a waffle cone all summer long, $1 goes to the rink rebuild, and I have already happily contributed to that. On July 1st, the ACA is having their second annual bicycle parade. Watch their social media and their website for details, but basically this is a bike parade, wheelchair, scooter, stroller parade. Decorate your gear and show up for a parade, and all the kids participating will get a surprise and a free ice cream cone. There's lots of information available about fall programming, so follow up with them if you're interested in that. The Queen Elizabeth Exhibition and Haltane Community Association, again, you can see their contact information on the screen. If you'd like to get involved, you can look at some volunteer opportunities under the Volunteers tab. Upcoming dates for the QEXCA that you might want to watch for: there will be a Some Theater in the Park event at the Queen Elizabeth School grounds sometime in July. The next meeting is going to be September 7th at 7 o'clock, and the AGM is October 5th at 7 o'clock. And so if you watch their website or social media, those details will be posted again, and you can check out some of the opportunities and some of the roles available in that organization to get involved. Finally, in the Adelaide Park Churchill, there are some positions available for volunteers who are interested: basketball coordinator, school liaisons for the schools in that area, a director at large, vice president, and newsletter coordinator. And their website can be viewed there. They're also on Facebook. So if you're interested, I would really encourage you to check those things out and get involved in your community that way. So thanks very much. I think that brings us to the end. Your worship, is there anything that you'd like to share?
Just to thank everybody. It was great to see how many questions came in and how engaged and active people are, and also all the great work that's happening at the community association level. I'm just so grateful for the work the community associations are doing right now to keep community strong. And as we get ready to reopen, I hope to be able to bring people together to see each other again and gather and enjoy the summer that I think we've all been deserving, and waiting for, where we can be reconnected more. While we do it safely, And while we be patient and kind with each other, knowing that everybody's going to have a different comfort level as there's a reopening. This is the time we're in, and I hope people are looking forward to a great summer.
Thanks very much. Well, Your Worship, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's always really a value added to have you here. I really appreciate the time you've taken, and thanks also to everybody who submitted questions, really have enjoyed the conversation. If we didn't get to you today, I will follow up by email, and if you would like to carry on the conversation, please get in touch with me and we'll take it from there. So thank you very much and have a great evening. Bye, everybody.
Take care.